looks like it's going to be a great session. I see we have a very, very nice turnout. So first I'm going to introduce Adriana Zaluka. Adriana is collaborating with me on putting together all of our videos and recordings on FOTech, and she is going to be holding a virtual symposium conference in early November. So Adriana, if you could just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Phil. So hello, everybody. I'm Adriana Zaluka with FOTech, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Phil, and for the introduction. And if you would like to see where Phil's programs are, I'm just going to share the link. This is a link to our website and specifically where we have Phil's Tech-NEW-logy programs. So,
thank you. So I'm going to introduce Shawn Barberis from More Than Money. Shawn, maybe you could start out just telling us a little bit about how More Than Money 360 began.
Sure. Thanks, Phil. First and foremost, thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it. So it evolved out of my wife and I graduating law school, and I started doing a lot of legal work for members of my church. And that continued to grow, and I started to work with some very successful entrepreneurs, some ultra high net worth families, 2000, 2001, 2002, 18 professional athletes and entertainers. And I was in Philadelphia finishing up an estate plan with a client, and he looked back at me. He was a real cool blue analytical. We're big on communication styles at More Than Money. And he didn't emote much. He didn't really use very dramatic language. One of the kind of kept his cards close to his chest, so to speak. And we get done the estate plan, and he looks miserable. And then we'll call him Fred. And, Fred, what's going on? Usually there's an exhale at this moment. And his response changed the course of my life. He said, Shawn, I am terrified. And that language really kind of kicked me in the shins, that this is just more money to mess up my 3 little girls. And I asked him what he was going to do about it. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. So I then turned around and hired researchers that started to understand the reasons why wealth transfers fail. We call them the 6 laws of family advancement sustainability. I began with research, and we developed various assessments that then eventually evolved into version 6 of our technology, More Than Money 360. So I saw that there was a hole in the middle of the professional planning donut. There was a lot of advice around the quantitative. There was not a lot of advice around the qualitative. There's not a lot of system, process, structure. And so we sought in 2007 to fill that void. And that's how More Than Money 360 came to be.
Josh, same question. How did you start, and what was the impetus to get you started?
Yeah. So thank you again. Also, let me add my thanks to all of you. Good to see several of you who obviously I know. Phil, thanks for having me. And Shawn, it's great to do this together. As will become clear as we get into this conversation, I'm a big fan of what More Than Money is doing, and see a lot of complementary aspects to what we're doing. So I'm excited to be doing this together. My story and Leaf Planner story really goes back to my own family story, as many of these things, of course, do, and even as Shawn was just describing his background. If I go back about 25 years, I was a practicing lawyer. My family was running a couple of venture capital funds. My dad was a world-renowned trust and estate lawyer. I'd say, but for the dot-com bubble and 9/11, everything was kind of looking pretty sunny outside. And then in 2000, my dad got sick. And when he got sick, we knew he was going to pass away. I left my practice and basically spent about 18 months with him as he was in declining health until he passed away, trying to really understand this wildly complicated enterprise structure we had in our family. For those of you who are in the tax piece of this world, as a number of you said we were filing 750 tax returns a year. For our family alone, we were embroiled in what would turn into a 33-year battle with the IRS. And so I basically left my practice to come help my family navigate through all of that. And at the end of that 18 months, I really realized, or shortly after his death, I really came to this conclusion of understanding how much stuff I still didn't know. And it was really kind of shocking to me. And some of that was hard data, and going back to Shawn's description of kind of quantitative and qualitative. a lot of it was the qualitative. It was why were things done? It was less so the family dynamics piece, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, during this discussion. But really, the why were things done? Who were the relationships? What should I have known? Lots and lots of pieces of information that went along, into the grave with my dad and with other people as they retired or anything else. So as I have spent the last 25 years in this industry, really in the family office industry, and I've been running our single family office for the last 20 plus years now, working with other families as well, and really seeing this gap in how we collect and share information. And so that's kind of the background, and I'll get more into that, I guess, as we go along. Also, Phil said it was okay, so just so I don't forget, I'm going to drop my contact information in the chat in case anybody ever wants it. And I look forward to this conversation. Thanks again for having me.
So Shawn, how did you decide to solve the problem with technology? Most people are basically just having meetings.
Thank you. That's a great question. Great question, Phil. So one of the things when I hired those researchers in 2007, I was really kind of doing this, facilitating and sparking qualitative dialogue within multiple generations of successful families, really since 2000, 2001. But when I got into it, and I said, this is my calling. This is what I want to do with my life. This is my purpose. And we got much more serious about it in 2007. I hired those researchers. One of the things I had them do was research the legacy governance industry. Where are they strong? Where are they weak? And they came back with some really, I would say, unique obstacles that needed to be overcome. Number one, it was really a very consultancy, traditional, we're going to interview grandma for 3 hours, grandpa for 3 hours. And it was very time intensive. It also required, which I think is just not the way the world is anymore, it also required everybody to kind of either be in one geographic location or be in one geographic location more often than they were. And then I noticed that the industry really lacked a clear client deliverable. Have a family meeting, it's all qualitative, you have those conversations, that's obviously critically important. But so many families I spoke to kind of said, well, we got done the family meeting, it was a little bit of crickets thereafter, and what do we really have to show for the financial investment we made? And that's what our technology does. It literally is the time capsule of all of a family's qualitative wealth, from their most impactful life experiences to the core values that are most important to them, to helping them write family legacy mission statements, philanthropy, gratitude, and of course, governance, the business of being a successful family. It was just too time intensive. And, we touch our clients for 30 minutes a month. We started in 2012 doing it through GoToMeeting. Obviously, the world switched to Zoom during COVID. But that's always been our business model. And kind of from beginning to end of a 6-month, what we would call project, each individual, depending on how long the family forum is, will invest anywhere from 8 to 10 hours total over those 6 months, which will then have an exponential positive impact. So we tried to be more time efficient. We are more time efficient. We are built for busy on the go, geographically dispersed families. And our technology, right in the palm of your hand, has all your family's qualitative assets in, twice level bank secure digital vault. So those three things I noticed in the industry from when we researched the industry were lacking. And so we sought to build it. And that's what we did.
So Josh, how did you go from just your family to decide you're going to use technology to reach out to other families? What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, it really was. So my family, as I realized this kind of problem, as I said, 22 years ago, I started building this idea that I kept referring to as the family owner's manual. And we called it an owner's manual intentionally because the idea was to say, I wanted people to understand in the family, this wasn't pick this up like the old bus book or in case of emergency file, pick it up when Josh or somebody else gets hit by the bus. It was really intended to be a day-to-day. How do you understand how this family and this family enterprise operates? And again, relationships and things like that we'll talk about. And then as I started working with other families, I would take them through this process over the last 10, 12 years as well, and realizing nobody had anything like it. And to some of the work that obviously Shawn and More Than Money does, it really was understanding, as Shawn's really saying, right, that there there's a lack of deliverable. There's a lack of how do you collect all this information in a particular place. And so we really saw that people were getting better at doing this work, whatever this work, however you want to define that, but there wasn't a platform on which to kind of build some of this work. So I think in that sense, again, we'll come back to it, but we're very complementary to what Shawn and that side of the industry does. But that really, Phil, was the impetus to say there's just no tool out there that's doing what we're trying to do.
And Phil, if I may, from my conversations with Josh over the last several weeks, one of the things that I think is really interesting is we are kind of two pieces of a puzzle that come together nicely. And Josh, correct me if obviously I'm oversimplifying what both of us do, but so much of what Josh does is understanding the why behind quantitative decisions. Why did we select Phil Strassler to be our trustee? Why did we hire Ken Eiler at Equivalence? The why behind some of these quantitative decisions. And what we're really doing is finding the why behind the qualitative side of the family. What is the purpose of the family wealth? How are we going to empower rising generations? And so those two questions of why, which are critically important to multi-generational success, both are important to understand. And I found that interesting that Josh's side is really explaining the quantitative side. And Josh, correct me if I'm saying anything that's incorrect, but that's been my understanding and my impression of it. And yeah, I don't really see that out in the industry very often or really at all. So I commend you for that work because it's important. Families ask those questions.
So Josh, maybe you could tell us a little bit about who your clients are and how they find you.
Sure. So our clients today are primarily families and family offices. We set out to focus essentially on the ultra high net worth and family office worlds, primarily because that's the world I come from. It's the world I understand. And so most of our clients are coming, I'd say somewhat organically, that there are some number of degrees of separation from me or the other people involved in our project. We've got about 70 families currently working on the platform. Yeah, I think that's probably as good an answer as I can give you.
Sure. And what about your client base?
Our client base is well, we serve two masters. First and foremost, our fiduciary responsibility is always to the family. We also partner with, we have 37, I believe it is, what we call more than money aligned partners, where we align with family offices to be able to offer our qualitative services to their clients. So that's a big part of how we grow. But currently our clients are, they can be G4, G5 of a large multi-generational family. They could be G1 and it's, 6, 7, 8, 9 folks in the family. So we have a lot of folks that are either, are blended families and came to us and say, hey, we want to operate as one family unit. Let's work on that. We have families that come to us that are families in crisis, whether it's through addiction or any other on any other means that come to say, hey, we need some help here, and we got to get our family communicating on a more meaningful level and get everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. We have family businesses that are saying, hey, should we sell? Should we not sell? What's the impact we want the sale of ABC company to have on the family? Or families that just sold and say, okay, what do we do now? So we're really, successful families have a unique subset of problems, and we're really there to help families work through some of those unique subset of problems, and they're like fingerprints or snowflakes. They're different for every family, but certainly, that's a lot of what our clients look like. They're all geographically dispersed for the most part. I have one client, graduate high school, child goes to Israel for a year, just the way the family's always done it, and they have an internet connection in Israel, fortunately, so we keep the trains running on time and we don't skip a beat. So a lot of our families are geographically dispersed. A lot of our families, if you look at the 9 years ago, Russ Allen Prince did research on the 9 personalities of the ultra high net worth. 34.1% of them are what they call family stewards, where the family unit is what's most important to them. And so we have a lot of our clients that are family stewards that the unity is critically important, or improving communication or getting the rising generation actively engaged is important. So we have a wide range of fact patterns that we see, and we're able to customize what we do for each family to be able to spark the dialogue that they're seeking to have. So I hope that gives you some background. Really varies from size and varies from what the real impetus is to engage More Than Money 360.
Thank you. So, Josh, maybe you could just tell us about the guts of the system and implementation. How long does it take?
Sure. So really, at the heart, I always hate to say that the best way to understand what leafplanner does is to see it. So if anybody's ever interested in that, happy to do that. What leafplanner is really attempting to do is essentially collect, organize, and really mind map, if you will, everything there is to know about a family or family enterprise, family business, family office, whatever those pieces are. So when I talk about relationships, for example, it's really important. We happen to be art collectors. It's really important for me to be able to document who are the myriad of people who I've engaged with over the last 25 years in the art world, who my family might need to contact if I wasn't here. So not just the traditional, who's the lawyer, who's the accountant, who's the this person or that person. It's, again, as Shawn's been very kind about saying about what the system's doing. It's the why behind, why did you choose Phil as the trustee? Why did you go into this transaction? Do you like that manager? Why did my family have 750 entities? My dad was the smartest person I've ever met to this day. I knew there had to be a reason we had 750 entities. It wasn't like he was creating them because it was kind of fun. So understanding that context. So that's kind of what's at the heart of it, is really mapping this whole piece out. Importantly, I'd say leafplanner is very much intended to be family facing. So it's not, in some sense, I'd say we sit in the ecosystem along with the ADAPARs and the data aggregation systems on kind of that hard data. And I guess one could argue those are family facing to the extent that somebody in the family might know how to use it. But the reality is leafplanner is really intended to be truly family facing. My artist sister can be in there and find information about who owns our house and who's the trustee and all these different things. The implementation question is really, again, kind of part of our own evolution from coming from our own family office, is that recognizing we wanted to build both the platform and the company in a sense to say we want to meet every client exactly where they are. And every client, of course, every family office, we all know, is, as Shawn again just said, right, a fingerprint, a snowflake, that we're all different. And so the implementation process is basically deciding essentially how much help a family or family office wants from us. We can do everything from train and onboard the family or the advisors or whoever's going to be in charge of building and maintaining what we refer to as the leaf plan, all the way to we can come in and do it. And that, again, is very intentional to say we want to meet every situation, where they are. Some families have an admin or somebody else who can take on the bulk of the work. Some family offices will say, no one's sitting around twiddling their thumbs. We don't have any time to deal with this. And so we need the help to do it. So we'll meet every situation where it is. That process is one of kind of a quick discovery call and series of onboarding calls, and then really laying out, is this something the family wants to accomplish in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? What's the onboarding timeframe the family wants? And we'll lay out with them the steps to get there. I'd say in the family office environment and in the individual family environment, it may be a little different, because we also want to be very careful that we understand the motivation of who's choosing to do this and why. In the end, the result may be the same. But if you have an 80-year-old patriarch who just found out they have cancer, the why may be the most important piece. If you have a 50-year-old entrepreneur with a young family who's not expecting to go anywhere anytime soon, maybe collecting some of the document data and the relationship data, maybe that comes first. So we'll really work with each, again, situation to lay out what that onboarding and building process looks like over whatever time frame the family wants to get it done.
And Josh, how many members of the family can participate in this, let's say, at the same time?
Really, again, it was, there are a lot of things that annoy me as a purchaser of services in this industry wearing my family office hat. So leafplanner is designed as a multi-user system. We don't care how many users you have. We don't care how much data you use. We don't care how many entities you have. We don't care what you're worth. Like all of the things that seem to me to be metrics that the industry often uses in pricing things, especially if you're a Microsoft engineer and you came out and you said, I'm going to go solve this problem. That's probably the way, sorry, Microsoft, you're probably going to think about it that way. We didn't want to think about that. So it's very flat pricing, as many users can be in there as you want. And that becomes important also, I'd say, in the family office context, because of course, you may have some family offices that are deeply embedded in each household, all the way down to who's the housekeeper and how do the bills get paid. And then you may have a family office that says, we stick to this lane, and our lane is the common assets or the enterprise structure or the estate plan structure. But if somebody wants to then come in and say each household could use leafplanner to move outside of that lane and capture the utility accounts and the housekeeper and the this and the that and all the other things, then you can have that kind of collaboration, if you will, between family members, family office, outside advisors, whoever it is. And so, of course, again, you can be inviting in lawyers and insurance people and whoever you want as those advisors to be participating in that process of identifying all the parts of the family ecosystem.
So how does it work, Josh? Is there someone that's in charge from the family of getting things done? How do you make sure that the implementation is done and is done correctly and is complete? Is there a way that you monitor that?
Yeah, so typically I would say there is probably a person, 1 or 2 point people, whether that's at the family office, the advisory team, whoever it is. But then on our side, we essentially, even with the lowest plan where we're going to train you and onboard you, but you, family office, are going to take on the bulk of the work, we're in touch with you monthly at a minimum to make sure, do you have any questions? Is this working the way you need it to? Do you need any help? In we basically have 3 different tiers of the plan. In different tiers, we're going to actually do a review of the Leaf plan for you and say, hey, it looks like you're missing these things or these connections, and we're going to come in and help do that. And obviously at the highest level of our plan, where we're building it for the family or the family office, we're kind of in charge ourselves of making sure it gets done. But there's a lot of our concierge team is there to be in touch with the client team in whatever way they want us to, and we want to make sure that the process continues to move forward. So it is a bit consultative in that sense, not in the, I guess, a somewhat negative sense that Shawn, you used that word earlier, but yeah.
So Shawn, what's the time frame that people adopt your system, and is it take a long time to implement the first stage? Is there a lot of training involved? Maybe you just give us some of the details.
Sure. So we believe it's a very logical approach. If you have an important meeting at work or church, you prepare for it. And what we started back in 2012 with GoToMeeting with our assessments was asking each individual family member to invest 30 minutes back into family unity, back into family vision, values, and purpose, and complete one of those assessments. So the way our process starts is we have a 40-question survey. We're surveying 2 factors: how prepared does the family feel, and how satisfied are they with their level of preparation. From there, we will then understand, we call them the 5 pillars of multi-generational success based on our research. And they are communication, core values, family legacy, gratitude/philanthropy, and governance. So we have over 75 assessments. We customize every project for every family based on their specific needs and goals. And then once we have that survey and we know, okay, this is where we want to, this is what we want to work on first, we'll customize that project. And then we're blessed. We have a team of 14 family meeting facilitators. We call them navigators. We're there to navigate the conversation. It's the family's role to have the conversation. It's our role to spark it, make sure the trains stay on the tracks, and make sure the trains run on time. So we navigate the conversation. And we're blessed with 14 navigators, each of which a decade more experience. And then what happens is each individual is assigned to a navigator. He or she will meet with Ella Chase. I'll just pick Ella out of the hat. Each will, they'll meet with Ella Chase for 30 minutes a month, completing one of our 75 plus assessments in preparation for the family meeting. This way, when we get to the family meeting, every family member has had an equal voice. Every family member has completed the same assessments. We believe that transparency breeds trust. So within our technology, everybody can see one another's completed materials. And so that indirect communication actually can help foster more meaningful communication. So we complete those assessments in preparation for the family meeting. Everybody sees the agenda about a month ahead of time. They know exactly what to expect when they walk through that door. And we will then have that family meeting, whether, on any of those 5 pillars of multi-generational success, or we'll do our ongoing governance, maintenance offering. But that's our business model. So that's how it works. If we want to do this over 6 months, we want to do this over a year. Now, we've had a number of situations where, Shawn, mom just got Alzheimer's. Okay, we're going to do a year-long project in 2 weeks, right? If each one of our assessments is a 30-minute commitment, we can grab everybody for 3 hours and complete all the assessments we need to do. We've had to do things like that many times over my 23 years of working with families, or there's just something urgent that's happening. So literally every element of our process is customizable, from content to the number of assessments, to how long out the family meeting will be, to how quickly we can get it done. We have to be that way because, again, every fact pattern is unique, and you have to be nimble enough to be able to meet that fact pattern and deliver what the family's asking for. So I hope that's directly responsive to your question. Sorry to give you the lawyer's answer, but it depends. It depends on what the family needs, and we're going to build it around that.
So, Shawn,
yes,
what are the rocks in the road, and how do you navigate around them?
Well, you always have the traditional, the stereotypical kind of black sheep is a bit of a rock in the road. And so the way we approach it is, when the family embarks on this qualitative process with us, it's like getting on a train. And if you're getting on in DC, the train's going to stop in Baltimore, it's going to stop in Philly, it's going to stop in Newark, it's going to stop in New York. And people get on and off the train as they please. I remember one time back in 2009, I had a family member tell me, we haven't seen our son in 9 months. And they called me up a couple of weeks later and said, we just saw our son. I said, where'd you see him? They said, in the background on CNN at an Occupy Wall Street rally. He had nothing to do with the family. Dad was a capitalist and so forth and so on. So the rest of the family engaged. What the black sheep wants is to stop the rest of the family from moving forward. The rest of the family engaged. And I worked with the sibling that he was closest with. I would reach out to that individual saying, every month, we'll just call him Fred again. Fred, family's moving forward. They all want you to take part. If you want to jump on the train, you're welcome at any time. And he ignored me for 3-4 months. We got through the first family meeting, and one of his siblings called and said, you're missing the boat here, because this has really given us an opportunity and a seat at the table. And that's everything you've always complained that dad never did. Reconsider. So he did reconsider, and he eventually joined back in, based on our business model. We got him caught up very quickly. And he was then now re-engaged with the family. And it took some thawing for a while. There were some things done in the family and things said that weren't so pleasant, which is common in almost every family, unfortunately. But he did. He got back involved, and he's now rowing the boat in the same direction. And so the black sheep, I think, is one of the bumps in the road that we face. Some of the another kind of bump in the road is that we are a bit of a unicorn in a very niche industry, in that legacy governance industry. We're the only firm that I know of, not Bessemer, not Goldman, nobody that has a technology to prepare and engage families. So someone's not going to pick up the phone, call their advisor and say, hey, do you have a technology that connects my geographically dispersed family? So that uniqueness is both a blessing and a curse. So we do fight that battle. And that's why it's wonderful for us to be able to be invited to opportunities like this to talk about the work that we do, because that's a big way of how we grow. But it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, our uniqueness. So I would say those are kind of the two rocks in the road that we need to overcome, both one on the family side and one on the business side, and furthering our mission to help families be more intentional, unified, and impactful.
Thank you. So Josh, what are the rocks in the road, and how much nudging do you have to do to get some of these things done? And how far back do you go in terms of record keeping?
So I'll take the last part first. Really, record keeping in this context can be as far back as the family wants. I mean, again, the system is designed to really be a design your own journey, if you will, in how you choose to use it. the rocks in the road, I would say, certainly are the adoption question. I think once, much like the kind of work that More Than Money does, if you've decided you need to do that kind of work, then hopefully you're dedicated to actually doing it. So if you decide Leaf Planner is a benefit and there's a return on investment, which I can almost, I wish I could figure out how to do the old TV money back guarantee, but I'm confident that there are multitudes of return on investment for families that engage in this. And for the families that engage in it, I'd say the vast, vast, vast majority obviously take on that work. But we do have to do some nudging. We have to help. We have had families that say this is more than we expected to take on. And so, upgrade to a different plan and get more help from us or whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that they're successful at it. I think the biggest, one of the biggest rocks in the road for us is really getting people to understand this needs to move from that would be nice to have to a must have. In many ways, it's like convincing the person who doesn't have a will that they need a will. And hopefully nobody on this kind of call would ever have a family member who doesn't have a will. But, we all know that that's something that people put off. They don't want to deal with it. And they don't really understand, hey, if you don't have a will, the state has one for you. And so there's going to be something there. And then I think we're facing a little bit of the same rock in the road that Shawn referred to of being a little bit unique, that nobody else is doing what we're doing. I think this idea of information aggregation as opposed to data aggregation is kind of a new thing. And so we're really explaining very much from sort of square one or step one, what that even means and what this is to connect all these dots and to do it in that way. And so I think a lot of people look at this and they say, oh, that's really interesting, but it takes a long time to kind of absorb it and understand, oh, wait a second, I get it. And so that's, I guess, our rock in the road.
So Josh, it seems that transparency is a big virtue that you are preaching. I would imagine that there are families where you get to a point in time and they maybe second guess themselves on the transparency. How do you deal with that issue?
Yeah, I think I'd say the transparency piece is really kind of twofold to me. One is the way I think we would all traditionally think of transparency is how am I transparently sharing information with family members or executors or trustees or whoever it is. And yes, while I happen to preach wearing my Josh hat that I'm a fan of transparency, I recognize that's not, every matriarch and patriarch. We all are dealing with matriarchs and patriarchs who are saying, I'm not revealing X, Y, or Z until I'm in the grave. And so that's fine. Leaf Planner, again, is designed, obviously, every user can have different permissions and different visibility. I have in my Leaf Plan a letter to my kids that's intended, of course, to be there for when I'm dead. My kids won't see that until I'm dead. So that'll be there. So you can really control that level of transparency. But equally importantly, I'd say, is really thinking about who are you being transparent to? Because one of the things that I think we think about when we talk about succession, first of all, we talk about people, positions, titles, all these different things. We really don't think about how do you succeed, how do you create succession for all the information that lives in all of our different heads. And that's one of the things that Leaf Planner is really designed to pick up on, as well as really that transparency, as you're asking about it, Phil, I think is not just do I think about transparency from this prior generation to next generation family members, but again, executors, trustees. How many people are trustees who have said yes because somebody asked us to be a trustee, but we're not prepared to do that. We're not prepared to step in and understand all of the family dynamics pieces on Shawn's side of the equation, or even all of the balance sheet and relationships on my side of the equation. So that transparency piece is more than just, am I ready to tell my kids? It's also, how am I better informing my trustees, my executors, my advisors, so that everybody is capable of doing a better job at what they're doing.
So that rings true with me. Shawn, I'll ask you the same question. So it's like transparency must be a big thing, but you must have a lot of education to do to different family members, maybe the older generation, in terms of what's going to be success.
Well, we live by the credo that transparency breeds trust. We designed our technology, when version 1 came out version 3 came out in 2012, and version 6 this past May. Everything that's submitted in our in our system can be viewed by every other family member. And we let every family member know that, anything that is any assessment that's completed, like for example, our individual core values based on the research of Dr. Robert Musgrave out of Australia. If, you can take 125 core values and synthesize them down to 6. So they complete that questionnaire, they identify of the 6 core values that are kind of the core, no pun intended, which ones are most important to little Johnny, little Susie, grandma, grandpa, and so forth. So the things that they're communicating about are fairly innocuous, but it brings down that barrier, and it starts to really help a family see how transparency and action can really help, even if it's something innocuous as your social style. Again, are you cool blue? Are you fiery red? Are you sunshine yellow? Or are you earth green amiable? And understanding your own social style as well as the social style of others. So we can't do our job as effectively as we need to do if it were done in silos. It has to be in a transparent environment, which not only serves the family's best interests, but at the same time will help us move towards helping families become more intentional, unified, and impactful. So you can't do our qualitative side, in my opinion, to the best of the ability that it needs to be done if you don't have a level of transparency about the qualitative. Now, one of the things that's often confused is, well, I don't want to tell the family how much we're worth. I don't want to tell the family how much is here, how much is there. That's a quantitative transparency, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a qualitative transparency. I have families I've been working with 4, 5, 6 years. I still don't know their net worth. I don't need to know their net worth. It's not the door we walk through. But having transparency on the qualitative side is paramount. It's indispensable when it comes to helping a family row the boat in the same direction and establish or maintain and grow formal family governance structures. The process just won't work as well as it could or should if we don't have that transparency on the qualitative side.
So Shawn, when you talk about family, how old is generation 1 that gets to use this all the way down to younger people? When do people engage, and how easy it is for the older generation to engage in what you're doing?
Sure. So we have a wide range. We have folks on the older end that we're working. I mean, I have one gentleman, he is 87, and he's actively engaged. He's completing all the assessments. We've been able to help him to be able to jump on the Zoom and be able to log in. For those that don't want to log in, I have another client who's 82 and says, Shawn, can we just do it over the phone? And I call him and I read him the questions. He gives me the answers. He gave me permission to log in as him, and I input it for him in that particular fact pattern. So if we have some in the older generation that aren't as technology savvy, we work through that by talking them through on the phone and them giving us permission to log in as them to input their responses, so that the rest of the family can see those responses. So that's really on the older end. On the younger end, we generally recommend age 13 and up. We believe that in our experience, when you're hitting 13 years old, you're starting to develop some pretty strong opinions. Now, we worked with a family out of Arizona, and this patriarch was adamant. I want my 6-year-old involved. And I said to him, we'll call him Fred again. I said, Fred, he's not going to grasp what we're doing. And his response was, I really don't care. I want him to know that this family proactively works on communication and making the world a better place and rowing the boat in the same direction, and that this is something that we proactively work on. And if that's the only message I get through to him at 6 years old, God bless America and all the ships at sea. So it's subjective for each family. We recommend 13 and up, but we have had as young as a 6-year-old. One of our navigators, Jenny Donovan, is actually has her master's in child and adolescent education, and she works with a lot of our younger children. So that's kind of the range that we've seen. So it really is obviously an extraordinarily wide range. I would say most of the patriarchs, if you want to look at the meaty part of the curve, are in that kind of 55 to 70, 71, 72 age range for the most part. So that would be the meaty part of the curve.
So Josh, who embraces your technology? Which age group, some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, in some way, I'm going to give you a similar answer. I mean, we don't probably go obviously down to the the super young kids as you would in the family dynamic setting that Shawn's dealing with. But we actually had a 96-year-old who just signed up last week. So excited to see how that one goes. We have rising gen family members using the system and even taking that on kind of as a use case as part of their wealth engagement. The system is, again, designed in a way to really be able to be accessed in lots of different ways, so much as Shawn's describing the way they're dealing with individual clients. We have obviously there's a web-based platform that you can use. It looks great on mobile for the young generation who wants to be solely on their phone. And then all of our guides, and there's a lot of guided content to what we do. All of those are online. They're also physical guides. You can print this whole thing to a PDF. So lots of different ways to interact with it in kind of old school and new school ways to make sure that every client can interact with it in whatever format they're most comfortable.
So, Josh, is there a cadence to updating? How does that work? And how do you deal with things like passwords and that type of thing?
Yeah. So on the cadence question, my hope or my goal would be that everybody makes this part of their almost daily workflow, because the way the system is really designed, there's a whole educational component to it. There's kind of a life management component to it, if you will, to effectuate estate planning or car registrations or whatever it is that you're trying to do. There's kind of a blind spot identification piece to it. And obviously there's the whole succession of information piece. But it's really important to us that people understand this is not a death product, right? I mean, it serves that function in a true succession of information, but it has a lot of functionality and value from day one. So from a process flow, my goal is that people will look at it and say, okay, that's going to be just part of our daily workflow. The family bought a new car, it goes into leafplanner. They sold a boat, it comes out of leafplanner or gets marked as sold. They did 3 new investments, it goes into Adapar and it goes into leafplanner in their own respective ways. So whatever those things are, we're hoping that it really becomes part of that daily workflow. But again, part of the purpose of things like being able to print the whole thing to a PDF is that if a family says, I really just want to look at this once a quarter, or once a year, I don't necessarily recommend that, but that's a way you could print that PDF and go through it and say, hey, these are the changes that have been made and the things that we've got to update. We created 3 new trusts. We did this, we did that. So there's lots of different ways. And again, our team is going to work with each family or family office to figure out what is that cadence going to look like. And then you asked a second part of that question that I think I already forgot.
Passwords.
So we think we are on the absolute cutting edge of cybersecurity, and I could bore everybody with our cybersecurity answers. But with respect to certain things, we basically have designed leafplanner to be what I keep referring to as platform agnostic. So the idea there is that if you're working with more than money and you're keeping all of your family meeting notes and your family charter and all these things in the digital vault and archive that More Than Money provides, that's great. All I want you to do in leafplanner is make sure that you can tell everybody that's where it is. If you're using Box or Dropbox or any of these other systems, SharePoint, Ignite, any other system for document management, that's fine. You can use those and integrate those with leafplanner. On the password side, I'll answer this in 2 different ways, I guess. From a security standpoint, I think we're as secure as anything on the planet. So I think that you could put all your passwords directly into leafplanner. We actually don't recommend that simply because we're not designed as a password manager. So we actually recommend that everybody use a password manager. My master password to my password manager is in my leaf plan. So it's not a security question. It's simply if you kept your passwords in leafplanner, that would be about as effective as the old yellow pad saying, hey, all the passwords are next to the phone on the yellow pad, which obviously some people are still doing. So that's okay too. But we really recommend that if there is a better system that is designed for a specific purpose, password managers are a perfect example of that, go use them. We're not trying to replace them. We're not trying to replace Adapar. We're not trying to replace other document management tools if you're using them. And so we're going to really work alongside those other systems.
So Shawn, maybe you can just give us some information on pricing. How much does it cost to engage you and your system?
Sure. So we do not charge as a percentage of net worth, which many in our industry do. I find that obnoxious. We're not going to work any harder for one family because they're worth more than another family. So given my lawyer background, it shouldn't surprise you that we're built like a law firm. We have partners, we have senior partners, and we have managing partners. And because of our business model, we know that if we have 10 people, 40 people, 80 people in a family, that we're going to have to invest 30 minutes a month with each one of them. So each family member represents an investment of time on behalf of our team of navigators. So we have partners that charge $3,600 per person per project. Our senior partners charge $4,500, and our managing partners charge $6,000. The other thing is that we have a mandatory rule of two. We don't care if it's a family of 5. We don't care if it's a family of 50. We have a minimum of 2 navigators on every family for a multitude of reasons. One, various perspectives for the family can be very helpful. 2, if a bus falls on Shawn Barberis and Rowie Diefendorf has to pick it up, that we don't want the family to miss a beat just because a piano fell on my head. So that's how we build our pricing, and that's certainly I think unique in the industry. When we look at our efficiency from a time perspective and a cost perspective, we're roughly 50-60% of the investment that most other firms would require. The way we view it is to expand your asset allocation, add family as an asset class, and invest some of that money back into that qualitative side of wealth. So that's how our pricing works.
So how do you define a project?
So again, we customize everything. So our projects can be either 6 months, 12 months, whatever's going to serve the goal that the family has. We typically like to start our first project to be 6 months, just so that we can get to know everybody, have our first family meeting. That'll greatly, I think, deepen our relationship with the family, our understanding of the family, and then we continue, we believe, to serve them at an even higher level after that first family meeting. So we generally suggest the first one be 6 months, and then after that, we see a lot of clients saying, "Okay, we see how it is now." It's a little bit like riding a bike. You have your family meeting, and in August, well, we're going to pick up the next project and have our first 30-minute consultation the very next month on the next project. So we just keep going. It's like riding a bike. But typically, families will start with 6 months, and they'll then move to annual projects thereafter. So that's typically how we've seen it. The other piece that also makes us unique is we have created an introductory offering. Sometimes families are, I don't know about you more than money, or I don't know if a family meeting facilitation process is right for us. So we launched something that we call Vision 360. It's literally $6,000 for the entire family. It's a loss leader from a business perspective, but it's a very research-based presentation. It's 3 45-minute Zoom sessions. Invite everybody in the family, invite your neighbors, however you define family. And it'll go through how to make families even better together and review some of the unique challenges based on our research that successful families are confronted with, how the most successful families in the world have overcome those specific challenges. We redefine wealth to be more than one dimension of financial. And, there's lots of folks there that have 6 dimensions of wealth. If you look at Dennis Jaffe's work, or, you talk to Jim Grubb, and I know from my days I used to do monthly conference calls with Roy Williams, God rest his soul, and he had 4 dimensions of wealth. We have 3: personal, financial, social. The point is, it's more than one. And then our last session, we have everybody complete our 40-question survey. We review the individual and aggregated results, and we also review a lot of research around what we call the 5 pillars of multi-generational success. So that's kind of like the appetizer before the main course. Some families start there and say, let's see if this is right for us. Let's see if more than money is right for us. It's a bit of that test drive. But once they move into the project, that's how the pricing works.
So Shawn, because it's technology based, after your initial implementation, how much time is it necessary for your group to spend, or can most of it be done by the family?
No, we guide the family through the whole process, and we continue to work with them, even if they've completed all the projects on the 5 pillars of multi-generational success. They still keep us on board. Number one, they still want to have annual family meetings, in-person family meetings. Two, we're then doing quarterly governance meetings. I'm thinking of a family that's been with me since 2013. Well, for the last 6 years, we've been doing quarterly governance meetings and an annual family meeting. Our clients, we have great retention rate because once they kind of spark this qualitative dialogue, most families don't want that to end. So they keep us on to make sure that that conversation continues. And the research will tell you that families don't want to have this from someone within the family, that they want an external professional advisor, whoever it may be, whether it's Susan Schoenfeld or Ron Diamond, whoever it is, to help their family guide them through. That we've seen that ring true in that, really our clients don't get rid of us in some respects. Just the nature of our relationship evolves from touching them for 30 minutes a month to having quarterly governance meetings for the family and facilitating those and managing those as well as the annual family meeting. So the relationship evolves, like many.
So Josh, what about the cost for your system and the time commitment?
Cost is, again, for reasons Shawn just also articulated, and I indicated at the beginning, it was important to us to not price this based on things that annoy me in the industry. So again, users, data, assets, entities, whatever it is. So we're very flat pricing. There's basically 3 tiers of the service. That it is an annual subscription. We're happy to adjust anything or customize anything, but it's basically predicated on 3 levels of the help that the family or the family office wants from us. The first year, it runs from $5,000 to $15,000, simply again based on, are you primarily taking on the work or are we primarily taking on the work? And then renewals start as low as $2,500. So it's intended to be very accessible, very easy to use, significant return on investment, and very flat. That's it.
So Josh, maybe before we close out, maybe just give us a couple of success stories.
Yeah, I'd say success stories for us are really interesting, different use cases. If I think about the idea that we're really addressing 4 kind of components, if you will, one sort of an educational and empowerment component, one's this idea of life management, if you will, one is kind of a blind spot identification, whether that's things that you knew you should do or things that you didn't even know to think about. And then, of course, is that succession of information piece. So if you think through those different lenses, and obviously you can use Leaf Planner with all or any of those lenses in mind. We've got a family that is one of my favorites, where we were doing a family meeting and one of the kids said, I want to know more about the family's real estate investments. And one of the kids said, I want to build a Leaf plan because that was what they found interesting about their wealth engagement with the family. We have family office executives who have been using it as a transition tool between a retiring executive and a new executive. We have a family that brought a risk consultant into the Leaf plan to do her whole risk assessment of what the family was looking at. So really kind of use cases all across the board, super interesting. Everybody's finding, different success from it. And I think the educational component is really helping people. We have California families. Obviously, I don't think there were any California families on the phone who are calling up and saying, hey, we knew we should have put the house in the Rev Trust, but it never got done. And for anybody on the phone who doesn't deal in California, California is currently running 2 years behind in probate court. So if the kids are stuck with a house, they're now maintaining that house for 2 years before they can turn around and sell it. So we're seeing success in those little kind of ways, although economically that could be really large, and success in I think these really significant kind of transitions and family engagement ways as well.
So Shawn, maybe a couple of success stories for you, old clients that have continued to use your system.
Sure. So we have a few different fact patterns that we see most commonly. One is typically around a family business, a family enterprise that the family's considering liquidating. And they want to have the conversation of, 1, do we want to liquidate it? 2, what do we want the impact on the family to be? Then we also have more mature family enterprises that maybe getting into G3, G4, and et cetera, saying, we got a lot, we got a lot of folks now. It used to be 10, then it was 20, and now it's 60. So, how do we manage that? And how do we become a more efficient, from a communication implementation perspective, become a more efficient family enterprise? And then you always have the family in crisis, whether it's dysfunction, whether it's addiction, whether it's just an overriding destructive mentality of entitlement over an attitude of gratitude. We need to all get on the same page. So I would say those are probably the three biggest. We do have some families that come to us that are blended. One family in particular has been with me since 2009, I think it is. His first wife passed away of cancer. On the same day he found out his wife was terminal, he found out he himself had cancer. Just an amazing story. He overcame the cancer. He fell in love again. He married his second wife who had 2 daughters. He was G1 and he said, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need someone to help me bring this family together and certainly help prepare my heirs to manage the complexity of wealth. So a lot of different fact patterns, but I think the meaty part of the curve is the family enterprise and helping families decide what they should do with the family enterprise, or have the family enterprise run a little bit more efficiently and unified from that perspective. So those are really the 3 major fact patterns that we see.
So I want to open up the questions from the audience. If you want to put a question on chat, you can do that. Don't see any questions, but I just want to say thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Josh. I think you really did a great job. I think technology and what you're doing are going to make a difference in many people's lives and understand it. And I'm glad that you were able to bring it forth and that you also can navigate with each other, which I thought was really interesting. So again, so here's some questions, okay? What happens when the patriarch dies?
Who's the question for?
Oh, both of you.
Okay.
Go ahead, start with you.
Josh, after you, please.
Go ahead, Josh.
So I would say the way we've designed the system, that implicit, I guess, in the question is a little bit, maybe the patriarch is the only person who has access to all the data. But for us, it's really a ongoing construction of the leaf plan to successive generations, to successive households, et cetera. But if we really had a situation where the patriarch were the only person with the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, we have, just like anybody in this industry kind of does at this point, we ask for legacy contacts. That could be the executor, it could be the spouse, it could be the partner, it could be the kids, it could be whoever it is who's going to then be able to have access to the system and get all that information. But we expect that sort of if you started building this at a G1 level, that G2 would succeed to that information. They may maintain that G1 leaf plan and create separate G2 leaf plans and different things. So hopefully that's responsive in our case.
That's very responsive. Shawn, you probably have that. You've had that situation happen, I would imagine.
We have, and the trains keep running on time. If there's a time in the family's history when they may need to be more unified, it would be when they lose a matriarch or a patriarch or someone that's critical to the family. Really, that's an inflection point where we jump into action a little bit more than we would on a 30-minute monthly basis and facilitating the family meeting. So we keep moving. We keep the trains running. Because that's really what the family in almost every instance, very few absolutes in life, but in almost every instance, that's what the family's going to need to do. And that's a big part of what we're doing. How does this carry on after mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, the good Lord takes them and so forth. So, if we're not ready for that moment, we're not doing our job.
Well, I want to thank you again. Both of you, outstanding job. I really enjoyed and learned quite a bit. I see some questions from our panel in terms of connecting to see whether you have demos.
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
I'll definitely connect all of you to Shawn and Josh. Again, thank you so much for your time. I thought this was interesting, enlightening, and your technology is really amazing. I've seen it. It works. So thank you again for your time. Everyone have a good rest of the summer. Our next presentation will be August 30th, and I'll send that to everyone. Okay? And Adriana, have a great day. Bye-bye.